My name is Robert Tackett, and I never thought I'd hear my own daughter call me a useless old fart. Not after everything I gave, everything I built for her. But she said it, right to my face, in my own home. And she didn't know. I was recording every word for my lawyer. This is the story of how I went from heartbroken and discarded to taking back everything they tried to steal. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people you love most, you're not alone. Grab a coffee, sit back, and stay with me. You're not going to want to miss what happens when a father decides he's done being silent. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button, especially if you believe respect doesn't fade with age. They say words don't leave bruises, but whoever said that never heard their own daughter call them a useless old fart in front of strangers. She didn't even lower her voice. I was standing right there, near the window, holding a plate of banana bread I baked that morning, while her husband leaned against the kitchen island, watching it all unfold like it was some cheap comedy show. My granddaughter was upstairs. Thank God. I don't think I could have handled seeing her look at me with the same eyes her mother did. "You don't need to be here, Dad," she hissed. "You're in the way. You can't even climb the stairs without whining. You're not helping. You're just existing. Existing." That word stung more than the rest. I never thought I'd live long enough to be a burden to my own blood. But that was the moment it shifted. That invisible line between love and convenience. It snapped right there in that suburban kitchen. Her voice cracked like glass against tile. "You're a liability. You leave the stove on. You forget to take your pills. You fall asleep watching the baby. What if something happens? What if you ruin everything?" I stood there, still, face blank, holding that damn banana bread like it was a shield. I remember the heat rising in my ears, the kind that comes when you're too humiliated to cry and too proud to yell back. I didn't say anything. I just glanced toward the security camera in the living room corner. She didn't know it had audio. She didn't know I'd been saving the footage. Every word, every insult, every manipulation, quietly, carefully, for my lawyer, because this wasn't the first time. The way she talked to me, about me, had changed ever since her mother passed. And her husband? He didn't care. He encouraged it. If anything, I started to think the plan had been building for months. Get the old man to move in after the funeral, make him feel needed, then slowly, methodically, remind him he's not. The sink dripped behind me. Her footsteps retreated down the hallway, muttering curses under her breath, and I just stood there, still holding the plate, still breathing somehow. I wasn't sure what hurt more, her words, or the fact that I wasn't surprised to hear them. I shuffled out of the kitchen, past the family photos I'd framed, past the piano I'd paid for when she was 7, past the couch where I used to rock my granddaughter to sleep. All those pieces of my love reduced to background noise in a house that no longer felt like mine. I sat down at the patio table out back. The sun was dipping low over the fence. The cicadas buzzed like static in the silence. I took out my phone and played the audio clip back just once. She said it again, clear as day. "You're a useless old fart." And this time, I didn't feel sad. I felt cold. See, my wife used to say I had a hard time letting go of people, that I always gave too many chances, that I assumed love was something you had to earn by being quiet, being helpful, being small. But I'm done being small, and that little audio file in my hand, that was the first nail in their coffin. Because I may be old. I may forget a few things. I may walk with a limp and talk a bit slower. But I'm not stupid, and I sure as hell am not useless. I built my life with calloused hands. I paid for their weddings. I co-signed their house. I covered the medical bills they never even knew existed. And now? Now I'm just some obstacle in their shiny little life plan? No, not anymore. You want to play this game? Fine. But I don't play loud. I don't play fast. I play smart. And if they thought I was just going to fade into the background like an old photo gathering dust, they were about to learn what happens when a father stops forgiving. Because betrayal doesn't always come with knives. Sometimes it comes with soft voices, with forced smiles, with whispered insults in rooms you used to feel safe in, and sometimes it comes from your own daughter. But before I show you how I turned their little plan inside out, let me take you back. Let me show you how we got here. Because there was a time, just a few years ago, when I thought moving in with them was the right thing to do. When I believed I'd found comfort again after losing the love of my life, and slowly, like a frog in boiling water, I didn't realize the heat rising around me was the sound of my family turning me into a burden. Let me tell you how it all began. After Margaret passed, I didn't know what to do with myself. We'd been married 46 years. She died in her sleep. Just didn't wake up one morning. Peaceful, the doctor said. A good way to go. But no one talks about what it's like to walk into a kitchen that still smells like her banana muffins and realize she's never going to stand there again. For a few weeks, I just sat in the house like a ghost. Opened the fridge, stared into it, closed it again, walked into rooms, and forgot why I was there. I wasn't eating. I wasn't shaving. I stopped answering the phone. That's when Beth stepped in. My only daughter. She and her husband, Scott, came by one Sunday afternoon with their toddler on her hip and that overly bright look in her eyes. The one she used when she was trying to sell me something. I should have recognized it. But grief clouds the things you used to see clearly. "Dad, why don't you come stay with us for a while?" she said. "Just for a bit. The house is too quiet, right?" And it was. God, it was. They had a nice place in North Austin. Open layout, backyard with a swing. The works. She said I could help out with the baby while they worked. "It'll give you purpose again," she smiled. "You'll feel needed." That word, needed. It clung to me like a lifeline. So I packed a few bags, locked up the old house, and told myself this was just temporary. I even convinced myself Margaret would have wanted it. But here's the thing about moving into your grown kid's house. You stop being dad. You start being the old man in the guest room. At first, it felt good. They made space for me. Beth set up the guest room with fresh sheets. I cooked breakfast in the mornings. Took the baby on stroller walks around the block. Made my famous chili on weekends. Beth even said she was glad to have another adult around the house. But then the small things started. Scott would roll his eyes when I'd ask how to work the TV remote. Beth would sigh when I needed help finding the baby's bottles. I remember one night I asked if they wanted me to pick up groceries. Thought I'd contribute. Beth laughed and said, "Dad, you wouldn't even know what to buy." It stung, but I let it go. I was helping, right? I was doing my part. Then came the pills. I take blood pressure medication. Have for years. One night, I accidentally left the bottle on the kitchen counter. Beth found it in the morning and acted like I'd left a loaded gun out. "What if the baby had gotten into this?" she snapped. "You have to be more careful." She scolded me like a child. I apologized. I told her it wouldn't happen again. But from that point on, she started locking the medicine cabinet. Said it was for safety. I felt like a tenant in my own life. The whispers started next, when they thought I wasn't listening. One night, I heard Scott in the living room. "He's always in the way. I can't walk into the kitchen without bumping into him." And Beth, softer, "I know, but we can't just kick him out. Not yet. Not yet." Like there was a timeline I didn't know I was on. I started keeping to myself after that. I'd spend hours outside in the backyard, trimming the bushes, oiling the gate, fixing the bird bath, anything to stay out of the way. And that's when I started recording. Not out of spite, but self-preservation. Margaret used to say, "People show their true colors when they think you've got nowhere else to go." She was right. One day, Beth asked me to pick up our granddaughter from daycare. I was honored, felt trusted again. I took the bus, Got there early, even brought her a juice box. When we got home, Scott was fuming. "You didn't bring the car seat." "No hello, no thanks, just that." Beth scolded me again. "Dad, she could have died in a crash. I hadn't driven. I took the bus. Didn't matter." That night, they argued in whispers behind their bedroom door. I heard my name twice. The next day, Scott casually mentioned something about senility during breakfast. I looked at him. I knew what he was doing. "You're not losing your mind, are you?" he said, half joking. I smiled. "Not yet." And he laughed like it was harmless. But I knew better. They wanted to make a case, paint me as forgetful, a liability, maybe for sympathy, maybe for legal leverage. Hell if I know. But I wasn't going to let them rewrite the narrative. That week, I bought a small voice recorder on Amazon, started tucking it into my shirt pocket. I began using the security camera app more. I even got smart, connected the footage to cloud storage. Quietly, no confrontation, just evidence, because something was changing. Beth had started asking about my finances. "Do you still have the life insurance from Mom's plan? What about your will? Have you ever thought about a living trust?" She'd pepper the questions in like casual chat. I'd nod, smile, say, "I've taken care of it," but I hadn't told her a thing. Not yet. The final red flag came on a Thursday. She came into my room, eyes puffy from crying. "I'm sorry, Dad. I've been under so much stress. Work's been crazy. The baby hasn't been sleeping. I didn't mean to snap." I almost believed her. Almost. Until she asked if I'd be willing to temporarily sign over power of attorney. "Just in case," she said. "If anything medical ever happens." That's when I knew. Something wasn't right. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of warm, quiet Austin afternoon where the breeze smells like cut grass and barbecue. I'd spent the morning fixing the latch on the garden gate. A small job, but it made me feel useful. I even left a little post-it note on the kitchen counter. "Latch fixed. Shouldn't squeak anymore, Dad." Beth didn't say anything about it. That's how it had been lately. More silence than thanks. But I didn't expect this. Around 3 p.m., Scott called a family meeting. Said it with a grin, like it was a joke. I dried my hands and followed them into the living room. Beth was already seated. Arms crossed, legs pulled up, chin tilted with a rehearsed calmness. My granddaughter was at a neighbor's birthday party. That should have been my first clue. Scott stood near the fireplace, a man who liked to hold court, despite never having earned it. "Robert," he said, using my full name like a principal might, "we've been doing some thinking." I sat down, felt my knees crack. "All right." Beth didn't meet my eyes. "We appreciate everything you've done," he began. "But we think it's time we all move forward. Separately." I blinked. "What does that mean?" Beth finally looked up. "It means you can't live here anymore, Dad." She said it plain, like she was commenting on the weather. I didn't move. "I don't understand." "You've been struggling," Scott chimed in. "Forgetting things. You left the stove on again this week." I hadn't. That was him. I'd written it down, time-stamped it. Beth leaned forward. "It's not safe. For you or for us. And honestly, it's time you considered assisted living." That phrase hit me like a kick to the ribs. Assisted living. I looked around the room, at the family photos on the walls, the little art projects my granddaughter had taped to the fridge, the books I'd read to her on the couch, and it all suddenly felt like a stage set. Something rented for a performance I didn't know I was part of. "I cook for your child. I do your dishes. I pay for her school tuition," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Beth flinched. "You did. But lately, it's just hard. You're becoming unpredictable." I felt my heart beating in my neck. "Are you saying I've done something dangerous?" Scott stepped in. "It's not just that. It's everything. We've spoken to an attorney. You're not being thrown out. We're offering options. There's a list of local homes. Good ones. Clean. Safe." My mouth went dry. "You're putting me in a home?" Beth stood. "We're helping you transition. You'll have your own space. People your age. You'll be looked after. I stood up, too slowly, too stiffly. I buried my wife 6 months ago. I gave up my house to be here, and now you're… What? Dumping me? Dad, she said, voice brittle. This is for your own good. She pulled a folder from the coffee table and handed it to me. Inside, a lease termination notice, pre-printed brochures of assisted living communities, a notarized letter from a lawyer I'd never met. And at the top of the pile, printed in neat blue ink, power of attorney, temporary authorization, signed. Not by me. I looked at her. You forged my signature. She didn't answer. Scott shrugged. You told us you were confused about paperwork sometimes. We just expedited it. The silence that followed wasn't still. It was loud, vibrating. I could feel the blood rush to my face, then to my feet. You think I'm senile? Beth reached for my arm. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I jerked back. No, you listen to me, I said, my voice breaking into something jagged. I gave you everything. You think those baby clothes paid for themselves? You think the down payment on this house came from your savings? Scott raised his eyebrows. This is our house, Robert. It's my name on the deed, I snapped. That shut him up, but only for a second. Beth sighed. Not anymore. And that's when it hit me. The refinanced paperwork, months ago. She'd asked me to co-sign a few mortgage adjustments, told me it was just for a lower rate. I didn't read it. I trusted her. I'd handed her the deed. I'd handed her everything. And now they were using it to evict me. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. Beth hesitated. You can stay at one of the homes on the list. Or we can hire a service to help you pack. Scott already scheduled a walk-through with a real estate agent. I felt like I was drowning. A walk-through. They'd already begun showing the house before I even knew I was leaving. They didn't care where I went. They just wanted me gone. I walked out onto the porch, folder clutched in my hand, chest heaving. The Texas sun felt like needles against my skin. I sat down on the wooden bench I'd built with Margaret 2 decades ago and stared at the rose bush I'd planted in her memory. That bush was blooming, still pink, still alive. And I was being discarded like a bag of groceries past their expiration. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour, maybe 3. Beth came out once, asked if I needed water. I didn't answer. I was too busy listening to the voices in my head, the ones repeating every moment I'd overlooked, every slight I'd forgiven, every time I'd chalked their behavior up to stress, or youth, or a rough season. But there was no excuse for this. This was betrayal, cold, deliberate, signed in ink. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at that rose bush until the sun went down and something inside me settled into place. Something quiet, solid, not anger, not grief. Something older, like stone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the occasional pop of the air conditioning vent and the soft hum of the baby monitor in the hallway. A house that once felt warm now felt surgical. Every photo on the wall, every dish in the cabinet, all of it looked borrowed, like I'd died, and was haunting a place I used to love. But as I lay there, heart still, mind racing, something shifted. I remembered something Margaret used to say. She said it when we were younger, when money was tight, and the shop was slow, desperation's loud, but dignity? Dignity is silent and sharp. I didn't have rage in me, not anymore, but I had something else. I had silence, and in silence, you can think. You can plan. So the next morning, before Beth or Scott woke up, I made myself a cup of coffee, black, and stepped out onto the back patio with my old notebook, the one where I kept every password, every account number, every bit of my life scribbled in ballpoint ink. The first thing I did, I logged into the college fund. See, Beth didn't know this, but I'd been quietly adding to a 529 savings plan I opened when my granddaughter was born. It was supposed to be a surprise for her 18th birthday, the kind of legacy a grandfather leaves behind. It had over $92,000 in it. I'd set it up under my name. So I transferred the full amount into a separate custodial account held in trust, with a new clause, accessible only upon the account holder's death or legal emancipation of the minor. Beth and Scott wouldn't see a dime of it, no matter how hard they smiled or begged. Then I moved on to the second task, the house. Scott said my name was no longer on the deed. He was right, but I still had the refinance paperwork. And more importantly, I still had the emails from Beth. Those sweet, bubbly messages where she thanked me so much for co-signing and couldn't believe I was letting them list you as joint borrower for the tax break. Those emails were dated. They were in writing, and they showed intent. I forwarded them to my attorney, not the family lawyer, my lawyer. The one I hadn't spoken to since Margaret's will was finalized. Then I made a quiet call to the county clerk's office to request the public deed transfer documents. I needed to see what they'd done and if they'd slipped up. Turns out, they had. The notary signature on the revised paperwork? The date didn't match the supposed signing date in the official file. That alone wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to suggest fraudulent notarization. That was checkmate fuel. Not yet, but soon. Later that day, Beth came into my room, holding a padded envelope. "Dad," she said, not meeting my eyes, "we scheduled the move-out day. They're coming Saturday." I nodded. "Do you want me to help box up your things?" she asked. I smiled gently. "That's all right. I've got it." She looked relieved, like guilt had just finished doing its job and was clocking out. What she didn't know was that I'd already boxed up everything that mattered: the paperwork, the recordings, the legal crumbs they'd been leaving behind. The rest, they could keep it. I had no plans to fight over the furniture. Furniture didn't matter. Narrative did. And speaking of narrative, I planted the first seed that same evening. While they were eating dinner in the living room, I accidentally left a folder on the kitchen counter labeled in bold black Sharpie. Contingency plan, do not destroy. Inside, a blank sheet of paper and an old photo of Margaret holding Beth as a baby. I didn't say a word, but I watched from the hallway as Scott opened it. He didn't say anything to Beth, but he looked over at her differently the rest of the night. You see, people like Scott aren't brave. They're opportunistic. They only go as far as the silence lets them. And now that silence had been pierced. The next morning, the real blow landed. I canceled the automatic tuition payments. Beth got the notification during her afternoon Zoom call. She burst into my room in a frenzy. "Dad, the preschool account says the payment bounced. Did you change something?" I sipped my tea. Calm, quiet. "I thought you didn't want my help anymore." She looked like I'd slapped her. "But that's your granddaughter's school." I nodded. "Yes, and it's also a private institution. I'm sure her parents can afford it." Beth stormed out, slammed the door. Later that night, I heard them arguing upstairs. My name was shouted, twice, and I smiled. Not out of malice, but out of clarity. Because here's the truth. The worst kind of revenge isn't loud. It isn't violent. It doesn't need screaming matches or slashed tires or dramatic exit. The best kind of revenge is patience and paperwork. It's knowing where the roots are buried because you planted them. It's watching someone dig their own hole while you quietly own the land they're standing on. I stayed another 2 days, packed slowly, let them stew. I was polite. I made my bed every morning. I left a thank you card on the nightstand. And then, on Friday morning, I walked out of that house with 2 duffel bags, a quiet heart, and 3 flash drives labeled with dates and recordings. I got into the cab, took one last look at the porch where I used to read bedtime stories, and I told the driver to take me to a small extended stay hotel near East Riverside. I needed time, a few days to breathe, to plan the next move. And that's when I remembered. I still had something left. 3 days after I left the house, I got a letter slid under my hotel room door. No stamp, no envelope, just a single sheet of paper folded in half, printed in bold black ink. Notice of incapacity evaluation. Appointment scheduled. Wednesday, 11:00 a.m. Signed, Bethany Tackett, power of attorney. They were trying to have me declared mentally unfit. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the letter for a long time. The audacity, the planning, the coldness of it. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about love. This was about erasing me. If the evaluation succeeded, they could gain full legal control. They could lock me in a care facility, take over my finances, silence me completely. And from the outside, it would look like concern. That's what made it brilliant. But I'd seen this kind of thing before. Back when I worked at the VA hospital years ago, we had a patient, a retired Navy man, whose son tried to push him into guardianship just to access his benefit. But the father kept record, had a buddy inside the system, took it to court, and walked out with full control, while the son walked away in handcuffs for fraud. I never forgot that. So when I saw Beth's little power move on hotel stationery, I didn't panic. I called my lawyer. The evaluation was scheduled at a private clinic, one I'd never authorized. But here's what Beth didn't know. Her temporary power of attorney was already invalid, because 2 weeks earlier, the day I overheard them whispering about my decline, I'd filed a revocation and notarized a new POA with my attorney present. Legally, her papers were dead in the water. But still, I went to the evaluation, wore my best pressed shirt, brought my own printed documents, answered every question with calm clarity. I even brought the security footage of Beth yelling at me, calling me a liability, just in case they asked about family dynamics. When the doctor asked if I felt safe with my daughter, I just smiled. I feel safest when I'm far away from her. The report came in 2 days later. Cognitively sound, legally competent, no concerns. I emailed a scanned copy directly to Beth's inbox. No subject line. Just the file. I didn't get a reply. But I did get a knock on my hotel room door the next morning. It was Scott. Alone, dressed like he had somewhere else to be. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside. Let him in. He didn't sit. Just stood near the minibar, picking at the label on his coffee cup. "We went too far," he said. Beth got emotional. I waited. "You should have talked to us," he added, "instead of, turning it into some kind of crusade." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think this is?" Scott looked up. "We thought you'd be easier to reason with, but you're making things complicated." There it was. The truth, unpolished. I opened my briefcase and slid a folder across the table. "Here's something to help you reason." He opened it. Inside was the original deed to the lake cabin, the one I'd inherited from my grandfather in Burnett County. Never refinanced, never touched. Scott looked confused. "This is a second property, paid in full, titles in my name. No lien, no mortgage, no witnesses, just me." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Beth doesn't know about it," I said. "And she won't, unless she drags this further." He flipped through the document. "Why didn't you tell her?" "Because it wasn't hers to know." That was the twist. The house they kicked me out of? Just a suburban investment. But the real wealth, the old hunting property with 15 acres of undeveloped land and lakefront access, had been mine all along. It had appreciated beautifully. I saw the math click behind Scott's eyes. "If you go near that property," I said calmly, "you'll trigger the trespass alarm system. It's wired to call local law enforcement. Sheriff knows me personally. We used to fish together." Scott finally sat down. "I think we need to reset," he said. I smiled. "I think you need to get a lawyer." He stood up. "You're really going to war over this?" "No," I said softly. "You started a war. I'm just finishing the paperwork." That night, I had a drink on the hotel balcony. The wind was warm. Soft music drifted up from a patio bar across the street. I thought about Margaret, about how she used to say that trust was a rope, and every lie phrase it thinner. I'd spent years holding on to that rope, even when it burned, even when it bled. But now I was the one holding the scissors. Beth tried calling that night 3 times. I didn't answer. I was done playing the quiet old man. Because what they never understood is that people like me, people who build things with their hands, who read every line of a contract, who pay attention when others tune out, we don't forget how to fight. We just wait, quietly, until we're ready. And as I looked down at the folder on my lap, a folder filled with deeds, letters, and recorded audio files, I whispered to myself, "You haven't seen anything yet." Beth invited me to brunch. That's how she played it. After weeks of silence, legal letters, and evaluation threats, she sent a bubbly little text. "Hey, Dad, let's have a fresh start. Come to the house Sunday, 11 a.m. Scott's grilling. The whole family will be there. Let's just talk." She even added a smiley face. I read it twice, then smiled myself, because I already knew what Sunday was. Sunday was the hearing. The date I had requested 3 weeks ago through my attorney in probate court. A petition to reverse the deed transfer. A challenge to the forged power of attorney. A presentation of audio files, financial records, and digital paper trails, all set to be presented before a judge. But I hadn't told her yet. I wanted her to feel safe, in control, like the ending was hers to write. So I said yes. That morning, I wore a clean blazer, Margaret's old brooch pinned to the collar, something steady in my chest. My hands didn't shake as I walked up the driveway of the house I'd helped them buy. Beth opened the door, all artificial cheer. "Dad, you look great! Come in!" Scott gave me a half-hearted nod from the grill. My granddaughter was drawing with chalk on the patio. I kissed her forehead. I held her little hand. I told her I was proud of her. That mattered to me more than anything else that day. We sat under the pergola. Beth poured mimosas like we were old friends. "Dad," she said, sipping hers, "I know things got a little tense, but I've been thinking. I want us to rebuild. I think there's still time to fix this." I nodded slowly. "Is that what you want?" "Of course. I just want peace." Scott chimed in. "We're even willing to help you relocate, to somewhere comfortable. And once things settle down, maybe we can revisit the trust paperwork." Ah, there it was. The pitch. The same scheme. Gift wrapped in a smile. I placed my glass down and looked across the table at them both. "Before we do that," I said, reaching into my briefcase, "I want to show you something." I pulled out the envelope, thick, stamped, and sealed with the county clerk's official mark. Beth hesitated. "What's that?" I slid it across the table. "Notice of hearing, probate court, today, in 2 hours." Scott stiffened. "What?" Beth reached for the envelope, her hand shaking slightly as she unfolded it. "I'm contesting the deed transfer," I said, "and the power of attorney you forged. Also petitioning for the return of financial assets, including the college fund, which I've already secured." Beth's face paled. "You can't do that." I raised an eyebrow. "I already did." Scott scoffed. "That's ridiculous. The paperwork's solid." I smiled. "Is it?" "Because you notarized the deed on a Sunday. Funny thing about that. Your notary's license doesn't cover weekend certifications." Beth looked like the wind had been knocked out of her. "And the voice recordings?" I added, calm. "They're all backed up. Every insult, every manipulation, every plan to push me out." Scott stood up, pacing. "You recorded us? Without consent? In Texas," I said coolly. "One-party consent is perfectly legal." Beth dropped the envelope onto the table like it had burned her fingers. Then I pulled out the last piece, the flash drive. "Judge Owens will be reviewing these today," I said, "along with the bank statements showing the mortgage funds you withdrew from the joint account. The ones marked Dad won't notice." She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. I leaned in slightly. "And, just so you know," my voice lower, colder, "I filed a backup report with the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. Not because I want custody of your daughter, but because I want it on record." that you tried to declare your father incompetent while taking his home and money. Beth stared at me, frozen. Scott spoke first. "Why are you doing this?" he snapped. "You're ruining your own family." I looked at them both, calm as still water. "No," I said. "You did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess." Then I stood. Before I left, I walked to my granddaughter and knelt beside her chalk drawings. She looked up at me with her mother's eyes. "Papa, are you leaving again?" I kissed her hand gently. "Only for now, sweetheart. But someday, when you're older, you'll understand everything." She nodded, serious as only a child could be. And then I whispered, just loud enough for Beth to hear, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what they can't take from you." 2 hours later, in court, Beth tried to play the concerned daughter. She wore a soft cardigan. Her voice trembled at just the right moments. She said she was worried about her father's decline, scared for his safety, just trying to do what's best. The judge nodded politely, then played the recordings. The courtroom fell silent. The clip where Beth called me a useless old fart hit like thunder. The clip where Scott said, "We can't just kick him out, not yet," cracked the tension wide open. By the time my attorney presented the deed discrepancies and bank withdrawals, the room wasn't even looking at Beth anymore. They were looking at me. At the quiet old man who'd come in with receipts, not rage, who had watched, waited, and struck with precision. The judge's ruling? Deed restored. Power of attorney revoked. Beth fined for fraudulent filing. Scott referred to the Bar Association for ethics review. And the final cherry? My lake cabin was exempt from any future civil claims. Its title had been transferred to a new family trust in my granddaughter's name. With Scott and Beth explicitly barred as trustees, I left that courtroom with my name, my dignity, and my future intact. They left in silence. No gloating, no goodbyes. Just the echo of everything they thought they were entitled to, slipping through their fingers. I haven't spoken to Beth since the hearing. She tried, once, sent a long message through email, full of half apologies and emotional justifications, blaming stress, motherhood, financial pressure, the weight of expectations, all the usual suspects when someone doesn't want to look in the mirror. I didn't reply. Some silences speak louder than any response. Scott didn't even bother. Last I heard, he left his job at the firm quietly, under the excuse of personal matters. No one pressed. His reputation was too singed by then. A few months later, my lawyer forwarded me a copy of a letter, an official notice that his legal license had been suspended pending ethics review. I didn't celebrate it, but I did feel something like justice. Not the kind with sirens and headlines, the kind that happens quietly, behind closed doors, the way dignity always wins. The lake cabin became home. It's not a palace, just a modest cedar frame place tucked between a line of pecan trees and a still stretch of lake that glows amber at sunset. I spend my mornings watching the herons glide across the water, sipping black coffee from Margaret's old chipped mug. There's no internet. No noise, no traffic, just space to think, and space to remember who I am. The repairs have been slow but steady. I fixed the loose step on the porch, rewired the outdoor lights, repainted the kitchen cabinets in the same soft green Margaret used to love. There's something healing in working with your hands again, in building things that no one can take from you. Sometimes I get visits, not from Beth, but my niece, Danielle, started stopping by with her boys on the weekends. She brings fresh bread and lemonade, and we sit out back while the kids chase fireflies. She told me she always wondered why Beth had gotten so cold over the years. She used to ask herself if maybe she had imagined it, if maybe Beth had been right when she said I was just difficult. But now I know, she said, pouring sweet tea into a mason jar. You weren't the one who changed. That meant more than I let on. One morning in late fall, I got a letter in the mail, addressed in crayon. My granddaughter. The envelope was sealed with 3 stickers and a lopsided heart. Inside was a note. "Hi, Papa. Mommy says you're not mad anymore. Are you coming for my birthday? I miss your pancakes. I miss your stories. I miss you. Love, Ellie." I read it twice. Then I folded it up and tucked it into the inside pocket of my flannel shirt. I didn't respond right away, because forgiveness takes time. Especially when it's not just a person you're forgiving, but a wound. But someday, when Ellie's older, when the fog of childhood has cleared and she begins to ask her own questions about love, about trust, about family, I'll be ready to answer. I'll tell her everything, not to poison her heart, but to protect it. Because she deserves to know that love is not control. That help should never be used as leverage. And that respect isn't something owed. It's something earned and preserved. Some evenings, I still think about the kitchen. That one moment, plate of banana bread in my hand, Beth's words ringing in my ears. "You're a useless old fart." That memory used to burn. But now I see it as a gift. Because betrayal, when it's that raw, has a way of snapping you awake. It strips away illusion, forces you to choose, shrink or stand. And I chose to stand, quietly, with patience, with proof. I didn't rage. I didn't retaliate with fists or fire. I did it the way old men fight best, with paper, with memory, with truth. And in the end, that's what held up. Not my age, not my money, not my strength, my dignity. I've come to believe something I wish I'd learned sooner. Growing old doesn't mean losing power. It means learning where your power truly lives. It's not in your knees or your hands. It's in your character. It's in how you teach others to treat you, not with demands, but with boundaries. Because the cruelest lie the world tells older folks is that we're burdens, that we're in the way, that we should be quiet and grateful for whatever scraps of respect are tossed our way. But the truth? We built everything they stand on. We gave them roofs, names, memories, and meals. And while they may forget that, we don't. And sometimes, when pushed far enough, we remind them. So now, I sit by the lake, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I still make banana bread. I even got the recipe right this time. I keep Margaret's photo by the windows. And every night, when I turn off the lights, I feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. The kind that comes when you know you stood up at the right moment. The kind that settles in your bones when you realize you may grow old, but you never grow small. Thanks for watching my story. It means more than you know. If you've ever faced something similar, or had to stand up for your worth when others tried to take it away, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that dignity doesn't disappear with age. It gets stronger. If this touched you, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story like this. And wherever you are, stay strong, stay grounded, and never let anyone tell you you're past your value.